Hello and welcome to our Reboot review. I'm Paul,
And I'm Dave.
and this week we are discussing the first movie, which is entitled Daemon Rising, which released in on November 18th of 2001. It was later rebroadcast as four individual episodes,
Hmm.
but yeah. So there's a bit of a gap here between the previous episode we talked about, which was early '98, and then here we're in the end of 2001. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna
yeah.
quickly go over like the highlights of what happened in '99 and 2000.
Hmm.
Okay, so for music, we'll start in '99, and I'm just gonna name some of like the big songs. I'm not gonna go through every one of them because that would take forever.
Yeah.
We have little songs that nobody's ever heard of, like "Baby One More Time" by Britney Spears,
And
"Livin' La
yes.
Vida Loca" by Ricky Martin,
Oh dear God, yes.
"Wild Wild West" by Will Smith,
Yeah, it was a time.
"Genie in a Bottle" by Christina Aguilera,
Yeah.
"Smooth" by Santana,
Yeah.
and then in 2000, oh my God, Dave.
Yeah. Yeah.
We get "What a Girl Wants" by Christina Aguilera. "I Knew I Loved You" by Savage Garden, which is, I think, their other song that people know.
Mhm.
"Say My Name" by Destiny's Child. "Maria Maria" by Santana. What else do we have? Those are kind of like the big ones.
Yeah.
And then early 2001, what do we have here? Yeah, okay. Some Janet Jackson, some Usher, a bunch of stuff that like people probably know, but the big one doesn't come out till the end of the year. Oh my God, Dave. When
Yeah.
does this movie come out? This is November. Okay, I don't care. At the end of 2001, it's "How You Remind Me" by Nickelback.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, okay, I'm not a Nickelback fan, but they get too much shit for being terrible when they're really, like, average.
And it was kind of one of those things of the typical, oh man, this one particular band's super popular, and then you got the naysayers, and then you got the overshouters of the naysayers, and then you just got the people sitting in the middle being like, it's fine, just whatevers.
Like, I'm not going to say they're good, but they're not shit. They have, like,
It was a thing that existed.
they have a couple of songs that I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't choose to listen to it, but if it came on the radio, I wouldn't immediately smash that radio.
Yes, because they cost money, and the last thing they need is to spend more money on trying to get new things.
So let's move over to video games. In 1999, my God, is this a banger of a year?
Maybe just a tiny little bit.
This might take a while.
Quite possibly, depending on how you're sort of gonna go about with picking the selection we've got.
So I'm gonna start in January, and then we'll talk about the January releases, and then we'll go like month by month because that might be easier. Okay, so in
Possibly.
January, and I'm gonna pick games that maybe aren't super well known, but they're well known, but they're maybe not the most respected. Uh,
And
so in
understandable.
January, we get WCW NWO Thunder on the PS1. Oh my God, Dave!
Supposedly the one? The
No,
super fancy wrestling sort of game, or like the terrible one?
this. Oh my God. Okay, so this is. It also released on the N64, um, and maybe on Windows too. Oh no, maybe it was Nitro that came out on those. I don't remember, but this one, you when you like, I think this is the one. Maybe I'm getting it confused with Nitro, but when you hovered over each of the wrestlers, they'd cut a little promo telling you why you should pick them, and they were incredible.
Interesting.
They were so shit. Oh my god! Especially when they pick people like that don't speak great English and ask them to cut a promo in English. It's kind
Yeah,
of
that might
like
be a teeny bit tricky.
it's not great. Also in January, though, we get some real bangers here. We get this little game on the N64 called Super Smash Bros.
Oh, hey, the thing that brought me to the party.
Yeah, nobody's ever played that game, and nobody ever will.
No, especially not its supposed sequel several years later.
Yeah, yeah. Also in January on the PS1, you got Silent Hill, and on the PC, you also got SimCity 3000, which are both
It was
bangers.
a thing. Kind of the marvelous thing of seeing it was like Sim City and Sim like things are video games. Never played them.
Oh, you've never played SimCity?
Not so much with City, no.
Oh, wow, okay. So in February on the N64, we would end up getting WCW Nitro and Mario Party.
Oh yes, all the Mario Party's fun.
Also on the N64 that month, we'd get this little game called Beetle Adventure Racing, which isn't technically a good game for memory, but it is a game I love.
Somewhat understandable, like depending on it, if it took the same sort of gameplay style as typical Mario Kart racers, then
Oh, it actually reviewed really well. For some reason I thought people hated this game. Maybe it was just people that I knew that didn't like it. It's it's a weird mix of like cuz it's made by EA. So it's this weird mix of them kind of trying to do Mario Kart but also trying to like mix it with Need for Speed.
interesting combination.
It's a weird choice, but it kind of works. On the PS1, you got Final Fantasy VIII, which I don't know if that's a good one or not.
It was a thing, though it was filled with a lot of melodrama.
And also Army Men 3D, because hells yeah.
Of course, it was a particular thing around that time that people loved the little Army Man characters.
I don't think. Okay, so, because these games were made by the 3DO company, and I don't think any of them were actually good. I think they were all kind of shit. They just sold well enough that they kept making them.
Yeah, one of the life's little miracles in the video game case.
Also, because we rarely get to talk about the Dreamcast, there is a Dreamcast release this month, and it's Power Stone, which is a game I want to play so badly because it looks dope.
It would be so amazing and fun, but they've only done so many sort of re-releases and whatnot in the past, and there hasn't been on anything that anyone could get their hands on easily.
They did a re-release on the PSP, but or maybe it was a remake or something. But yeah, I don't know why this game hasn't got a re-release on like a modern console.
It would be so much fun.
Yeah, this game looks so cool, and I'm always like, it's basically like Capcom's like kind of like a Capcom version of like Smash Bros.
Indeed.
In March, we get Need for Speed High Stakes, which I remember being kind of meh. Because I feel like this is the one after Hot Pursuit. Yeah, it's the one after Hot Pursuit, and I feel like Hot Pursuit was a lot better. Or at least I enjoyed it more. Also in March, you get Gex 3. What else do we have in March? That's really... Oh, Pokemon Snap, my god.
Oh my
Also in
dear
March
God.
is Roller Coaster Tycoon.
Ooh, with those ones. Additional notable things from what I'm seeing on here. Um, One particular one was the Dungeons and Dragons collection. Believe from what it was saying. Okay, onto the Saturn, but it's a case of it is more of a console release of arcade Dungeons and Dragon games from cabinets and whatnot. Uh, Supposedly Tower of Doom. Nevertheless, very much fun game to play with a multitude of people.
I've never played any of the Dungeons and Dragons video games.
They are very neat, though it is a case of choosing your path and, yeah, certain various decisions that you need to do. And just for the meme and jokingness, there's Pepsi Man on the PlayStation 1.
Oh, Pepsi Man is a banger. There's also EverQuest, which is a game that is still going,
Yeah, it's still going.
even though there's a sequel to it.
Yeah, amazingly enough. And just one last little note of the March pick was Legend of Legaia, a fancy little easy RPG style game with a button input attack style that was interesting for its methods and whatnot, but never really went much more than itself and a sequel it had later on the PS2.
Alrighty, so moving on to April, we get Team Fortress Classic on the PC, which is, originally a mod for Quake, and it's Team Fortress. People like it, but it's not really my thing. Alien vs. Predator on the PC. Baldur's Gate on the PC. Well, technically, it's an expansion. It's Tales of the Sword Coast, but I still wanted to shout out Baldur's Gate.
Yeah.
April 30th is, okay, this is going to be a little confusing for some people, but it's Pokemon Stadium 2, which is then Pokemon Stadium in North America.
Yes, the marvelous case of Japan made a Pokemon Stadium game that was horribly riddled with glitches and other particular things. And then when they got it updated with its sequel, they're like, oh, hey, the states are really like the Pokemon popularity and whatnot. Let's send this new version to it. What do we call it? Well, I guess just Stadium. We don't need to bother with the two.
Yes, also on April 30th, Super Mario Bros. Deluxe on the Game Boy Color, which I believe was just basically like a remake of the first Super Mario Bros., but with slightly better graphics. Because it was on a slightly more powerful system, although not by much.
Mm.
Moving on into May, Ape Escape on the PS1 is really, well, there's the Street Fighter game, but it's a Street Fighter game nobody cares about.
Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, which has its occasional lovers and whatnot, but there were intrinsics that were with it that all fighting games kind of have at some point.
Moving on to June, the big ones basically, you've got Counter-Strike on the PC. Counter-Strike is a really good game for the two people who haven't played it at this point. Also, Persona 2. Apparently, people like the Persona games. I've never played. No, that's not true. I did play part of one. Because me and Justin did a video about it.
Yes, so I'm quite questioning which particular one it was. Possibly 3, but more likely maybe 4.
I think it was 3. Let me check. I'll know by looking at... I'm pretty sure it's 3. Because I called my character Fish Sticks. Go back and watch that video. It makes more sense in context.
Yeah.
Like, barely, but it does make more sense then. Also, in June, you get Pokemon Pinball on the Game Boy Color. Croc 2 and Driver would come out on the PS1 and later on PC. Did you ever play any of the Driver games?
I think maybe 1 or 2. Can't specifically remember which one it would have been, but driving game. Nothing too much else aside from it.
So the first one, you can't get out of the car, but the second one they try to make it a bit more GTA, and you can like do stuff on foot and that. And
It
the
was a
third,
popular thing at the time.
exactly, and the third one they try to go full GTA, and it's really bad.
Mildly surprising, but also so sad.
Yeah, Driver 3 is like notorious. Okay, so let us move on to July. We get Dungeon Keeper 2 on PC. We get Ogre Battle 64 in Japan. It
Yeah, that marvelous case of a neat sort of game that did not come on over here till many years later.
took a while for that to come out here, I think. Oh, it
Mm.
came out in 2000 here, so it wasn't that long. It was only like a year and a half. That's not as bad as I thought it was. We also get some little games like Prince of Persia goes to the Game Boy Color. We get this little. Nintendo did something interesting here in July where they released Mario Golf, but they released different versions of the game, one for the N64 and one for Game Boy Color, trying to get people to buy basically the game twice.
Supposedly. And then also the case of they don't want to leave other people out if they only have one of the systems. Though it is also a case of it's one of the sports games. They're going to make double versions of it for multiple systems.
I think this is inspired by releasing two versions of Pokemon, and people would buy both versions. I think that's what the reason they did that here was they're like, oh, we can like have it so you can port your character back and forth and have like the home version, and then if you're going away, you can move your character over to the Game Boy Color and play it on the go. I think that was kind of the thinking here.
Supposedly. I'm not sure if there's a specific connection between the N64 and the Game Boy Color, though.
Yeah, they had the whatchamacallit. What was that called? Because you could do it in Pokemon, where you could move your with Pokemon Stadium. You could take your Pokemon from the Game Boy cart and put it onto the N64.
Though that is true. Though it's the annoying fact that that specific package thing is not included with the game specifically.
Yes. Also in July, we got the new Tetris on N64, which was an
I think it was
interesting game.
essentially just old Tetris, but it was like either more Tetris.
I want to say they did some kind of new stuff with this. They changed it up a bit. I remember it being an interesting game, but not like super incredible.
Mhm.
Moving on to August, we get System Shock 2 on PC. We get Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver on PC, but it would later come to PS1 and Dreamcast. We get Command and Conquer Tiberian Sun on the PC, Shadow Man on a whole bunch of consoles, and at the end of August, we got Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Rogue Spear on PC, and then a bunch of other stuff later.
Hmm.
Moving on to September, when, oh my god, they decided to release every major game this year. Okay. So we get Sonic Adventure, which originally launches on the Dreamcast, but would later go to PC and the GameCube.
Yes.
We get the original Soul Calibur, which would launch on the Dreamcast and. Oh, in the arcades, of course. We get Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, which originally launches on the PS1, but fairly quickly goes to PC and Dreamcast, and then eventually to the GameCube. We get Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, which launches on a whole bunch of things, not necessarily right away, but pretty quickly makes its way around. We get Age of Empires 2, The Age of Kings on PC. We get Crash Team Racing on PS1. We get Final Fantasy VI on PS1, although I thought we had Final Fantasy like 8 a little while ago.
It's one of the marvelous cases of this is. Oh no, it is properly six, but when it was first released here, it was originally three, but it is specifically six. It's just a re-release from when it was on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System.
Yeah, because Final Fantasy games aren't confusing enough.
Yeah.
Pac-Man World on the PS1, which would later come to the Game Boy Advance. Moving into October, we get Jet Force Gemini on the N64.
Mm.
Dead or Alive 2 on the Dreamcast and in arcades, and pretty quickly goes over to PS2. For the Game Boy and Game Boy Color, we get Pokemon Yellow Special Pikachu Edition. Which version of the original Pokemon did you have? Did you have Yellow? Or were you a blue boy?
And it was the original case with me. I picked up a blue version, and then I can't remember the circumstances, but I ended up also with a copy of yellow.
Okay, so I was a red boy. I
No,
had
understandable. Kind of the case of giant flying dinosaur and whatnot. Made sense.
yeah, exactly because was it Charizard that was on the cover or was it just Charmander?
Charizard with red, Blastoise with blue.
Okay, because I couldn't. I knew it was one of them. I was like, is it the fully evolved? But yeah, I was like, I was what, like 9 when that game came out. So I'm like, oh, giant like fucking dragon on the cover. I want that one.
And then, of course, with me hearing about it from all the people, just being like, haha, they're all gonna pick the fire thing, so I'll go with the water thing to have an advantage.
Following that, we would get Grand Theft Auto 2 on the PS1 and PC, but later on a whole bunch of other stuff. Rayman 2: The Great Escape, which basically went to everything as well.
Yeah, so true.
And then at the end of October, South Park Chef's Love Shack.
Yeah, yeah, that was a thing.
Do you know anything about the Love Shack game?
Quite honestly, no. I think the only one I specifically remembered was the first person one that they had on the N64 where you attack turkeys with snowballs.
Yes, that is, I think, just called South Park, if memory. So, Chef's Love Shack was like they were trying to kind of do like a Mario Party thing.
Completely understandable, especially with the one that released earlier that year. And it's like, oh, thing that's popular. Let's do this thing.
So there was like some mini games, and then you had to answer like trivia questions and stuff. It's not good. Shocking no one. It's just not good.
Sadness.
In November, oh my god, there's a ton of releases. On the PS1, there's Spyro 2. We get SimCity Theme Park on the PC. Half-Life Opposing Force, which is an expansion pack for Half-Life. We get Medal of Honor on the PS1, which, fun fact about this, I think this is the one that's like produced by Steven Spielberg. Yeah, Steven Spielberg produced this game, and I think helped come up with the story for it. We also got Age of Wonders on the PC. Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine on PC. Tomorrow Never Dies on PS1. Chrono Cross came out in Japan on PS1. Pokemon Gold and Silver would come out in Japan. Tomb Raider: The Last Revolution came out on a couple of things. Unreal Tournament comes out on PC, but would later go on to PS2 and Dreamcast not too long after. SWAT 3 Close Quarters Battle, which did you play any of the SWAT games? Because they were PC games, so I'm not sure if you would have.
No, with around this time, there was the computer available, but it was mostly either a case of educational games or like pinball and the simple little things that you could get on that. I never went to the advancement of getting any higher end computer sort of games. It was
Okay.
more console games in my case.
Okay. Also in November, you get Donkey Kong 64, which is a great game.
It is so much fun, but if you do not like collecting, do not touch it because you have to collect all the things. All the things.
Which is kind of the weakness of this game to me. Like, I appreciate a collectathon, but this isn't one collectathon, it's like 5 collectathons.
Yeah, because they had the first decent one that was Banjo-Kazooie, and then Banjo-Kazooie 2, Banjo-Tooie that was good but sort of starting to push the line, and then Donkey Kong 64 completely pushed it over the cliff into free fall.
Yeah, the problem. So my issue with Donkey Kong 64 is like, you have to. The different characters have different abilities, right? Which makes sense. But
Yeah,
there's so much stuff where you have to go back and like with another character, and I hated that part.
yeah.
In November, we would also get this little game called South Park Rally.
Because kart racers.
Yes. In December, we would get The Legend of Dragoon in Japan on PS1. We would get Quake 3 Arena. We would get Gran Turismo 2. We would get Mario Party 2, but that was in Japan.
Mm.
We would get. Oh my god. Sonic the Hedgehog Pocket Adventure for the Neo Geo.
It was a
The
thing.
little pocket color. Oh my god. Um, Also in December, you got Harvest Moon 64, which is a great game, although it uses all of the same assets from which is Back to Nature, which is something I discovered recently when I played Back to Nature for the first time in 20 years. On the Dreamcast, you get this little game that was never culturally relevant or significant in video games at all, called Shenmue.
Yeah, it's kind of a marvelous thing. I knew it was a thing. It was kind of around, but just in case I never touched it.
Yeah, a lot of people I don't think played Shenmue, but um, you can't dispute how important Shenmue is.
So very true.
Like it's kind of, and I'm sure there's going to be people who are going to be like, no, that's not correct. But it's one of the first games that kind of really pushed having a story that was actually good,
Yeah, yeah.
and it was like, yeah, it's just kind of like a new type of game that has become very popular now, especially with like the PlayStation exclusive stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, 2000 we're going to really skim through because there's a lot.
Oh boy, is there ever.
Okay,
But
crazy.
anyways, you supposedly go through the list and then we'll kind of touch on the one or two.
Stop me if anything piques your interest that you want to talk about. So we got Crazy Taxi, Mario Party 2. No, I thought you might stop me on Mario Party 2.
It's
Resident
kind of
Evil
one of those
Code
things
Veronica.
that it completely missed me, quite honestly.
Oh, yeah, you never played 2, right?
No, it was a case of I only kind of got into it with either the first one and then didn't get my own copy until three.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Resident Evil Code Veronica, The Sims, Dead or Alive 2. We get Pokemon Stadium in North America for the first time. That might be re-release. Oh no, that would have been the initial release because Pokemon Stadium 2, which is this, just came out in Japan in the middle of last year.
Ah,
Wario Land 3, Thief 3, Kirby 64, Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, but it's the Dreamcast version. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask.
ooh.
That's that's a banger. Excite Bike 64, which is an underrated game that people don't remember.
It was one. It was there. Friend had it. Never had it myself.
Okay, fair enough. Um, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six, SimCity 3000 Unlimited, which was like I think it had like an expansion pack or something included in that.
Hmm.
Perfect Dark, Daikatana.
Ugh.
Did you ever play Daikatana?
No, and that's probably for the best.
Daikatana's fucked.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, for those of you who don't know, I'm going to quickly do the history of Daikatana. Daikatana was made by John Romero, who made. Look, if you played a first person shooter in the early 90s, you probably made that game. He did, like, Wolfenstein 3D, Doom, Quake. And then he left id Software to have his own company, and he made this. He made a game called Daikatana. The biggest problem was the game. It was like a squad based game, kind of, but the AI is
Hmm.
really fucking stupid,
Yeah.
so it fucks you constantly. And the console version, the a PC version has 24 levels, but the console version only gets 18. So if I remember correctly, if you play the console version, a bunch of shit doesn't make sense because they just cut chunks of the game out.
Jeez.
Continuing on. Space Channel 5 comes out this year. We get a re-release of Tomb Raider on the Game Boy Color. Well, like a Game Boy Color version of Tomb Raider, I should say. The Legend of Dragoon comes out on PS1 in North America, and I'm sure 10 people played it.
Yeah.
Deus Ex came out on the PC. Diablo 2 came out on the PC. There's another version of Persona 2. I don't understand all this Persona nonsense. Jet Set Radio comes out on the Dreamcast. I can skip all of that. We get Chrono Cross on the PS1. There's an Age of Empires 2 expansion called The Conquerors. Mario Tennis comes out on the N64. WWF Royal Rumble comes out on the Dreamcast, and nobody likes it.
Sadness.
We get Spider-Man on the PC, PlayStation 1, Game Boy Color, N64, and later on the Dreamcast. We get Parasite Eve 2, which is a series that should come back or get like a remake or something because it sounds super interesting, but I don't want to try to play the PS1 versions.
It would be neat, though they sadly would most likely change it, which is saddening.
Yeah, I feel like with like the Resident Evil remakes and stuff, I feel like maybe we're getting to a point where they would consider it, but I don't know. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 comes out and releases on just basically everything. Okay. So this one's significant to us because we've talked about this series. Buffy the Vampire Slayer comes out on Game Boy Color.
Oh man, all the fanciness on a Game Boy game.
And disappoints everyone.
Yeah.
It's bad. Dragon Warrior 1 and 2. Pokemon Gold and Silver come out in North America. Donald Duck Go and Quackers, which comes out on basically everything. Which is another game that nobody seems to remember, but is pretty good, actually, considering it's a licensed game.
Understandable. It's a case of I remember it, seeing the front page of it when you see it on the case. You don't ever forget it. But case of actually playing it, no dice.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty solid platformer. Quake 3 Arena came out to the Dreamcast. We get Command & Conquer Red Alert 2. We get Time Splitters on PS2 because, Time Splitters.
Yes.
Mega Man Legends 2. Ridge Racer 5 on PS2. Spyro Year of the Dragon on PS1.
Yes.
SSX on PS2. One of my favorite shit games. The Grinch comes out on Dreamcast, but pretty quickly, or maybe it's already out on... Is this already out on PS1, or does it come on a PS1 the next year? Oh no, it comes out around the same time. Okay. It's a shit game, but it's great. We also get Crash Bash on the PS1, which I feel like nobody remembers.
Yeah.
Because it was them trying to do a Mario Party again, because Mario Party was very successful. The World Is Not Enough comes out on a bunch of systems. We get Escape from Monkey Island. We get a re-release of Counter-Strike because it goes to... I forget how this all works, but it's Counter-Strike comes out... it's confusing. Counter-Strike thing's confusing.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy IX comes out on the PS1. Is this a particularly significant Final Fantasy game?
It's one of the ones that I first saw when I was young, but never really played it until years after. But it's nice for its mixture of the older styles in comparison to the popularity that 7 kind of exploded with. And especially with the couple things that it works with, fits into its story. It's one that I find nicely nostalgic for the fantasies that I played through.
Okay. We would also get anything important. 007 Racing, which is a shit game that I love. Banjo-Tooie. Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX, because they got to cash in on Tony Hawk being big. I Tell a Lie. Apparently Harvest Moon Back to Nature came out after the N64 version, so this game stole its assets from that game. Is this the game I think it is? It is. Okay, Scooby Doo classic creep capers. I take it you don't remember this game.
Like maybe vaguely, even just with looking over it from here, it's just the case of Scooby Doo game, somewhat understandable. Maybe seen a little bit of gameplay, but nothing I've actually played.
Okay, you get to kind of like go back and play through like a bunch of classic episodes. It's a pretty fun concept. We get Pokemon Puzzle Challenge, but I think it's only the Game Boy Color version. Yeah,
Mm.
that's the Game Boy Color one. Pokemon Puzzle League was the N64 one.
Okay.
American McGee's Alice comes out, which is a game you've probably never played or heard of.
Well, it's kind of a marvelous case of I heard about its one of its sequels that came out around the time of the PS or in the Xbox 360 age. And it's like, oh, dark sort of concept of Alice. That seems new. And then it's like, oh wait, this is an entire series that's lasted for years. Where the heck have I been?
Yes, Madness Returns was 2011, and oh, uh, hmm. Anyway, we're not going to get into Madness Returns. Moving along, I'm not going to talk about any of the Japanese games because we'll cover them in a few minutes. Oh, ECW Anarchy Rules. That game's shit. I feel bad for ECW because they never got a good video game. Like, literally both of the games they had were shit. Okay, 2001. RuneScape comes out.
Yeah. Yeah.
We get Mega Man 64, which is a port of Legends, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Mario Tennis comes out. Phantasy Star Online. A little game that nobody remembers called Paper Mario comes out.
Paper Mario's have the funness.
Yes. And I have to play the new Thousand Year Door. I have to download that at some point. The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages comes out, but in Japan. But I always loved this idea where they made the two games that's like they sort of connect, don't they?
Yeah, it's the basic concept of going with the concept of that Pokemon popularized, but it's more so it has the entire Zelda experience split between two different games where one is a bit more adventure focused, while the other one is a bit more puzzle focused. And going through the main story, going to the end, they had the ancient password system where taking it through the other game or using it on your game gives you bonus effects or transfers your save from one game to the other.
Okay, that's cool. And then there's like a special linked ending, I think.
Yes. If you link one game to the other game, the end of the second game will be added on to additional story to complete the entire saga.
I love that. I don't know why they haven't done that since.
Possibly the thought of issue with possibly again trying to sell people multiple games for trying to continue on with stuff like that. And I think also just the case with nowadays, just it's far easier just to smush in DLC just to
Yeah,
add stuff to the
that's a
game.
fair point. But they do it. They still do it with like Pokemon. Like they still release two versions of those games.
So in that sort of case, it's either tradition and or base concept of their business model.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, moving along. Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you ever play much of Conker's Bad Fur Day?
It was a case of I never really touched it until the re-release that they did on the Xbox, but it was still kind of a case of I knew of Conker from Diddy Kong Racing, and it was just kind of a case of, oh my gosh, what the heck happened to turn him so horribly rude?
I forgot that he's in Diddy Kong Racing. That's hilarious. Moving right along, we got SpongeBob SquarePants, Legend of the Lost Spatula, which is a Game Boy Color game.
Yeah.
Daytona USA came out on the Dreamcast. Pokemon Stadium 2 comes to North America. Black and White comes out on Windows, which I've never played Black and White, but I've played games similar to it and inspired by it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What else do we have? Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine comes to the Game Boy Color. Oh my god. Okay. Snoopy Tennis on the Game Boy Color.
On the one hand, I understand, but also kind of the case of no, I suppose even at the time with the characters from Charlie Brown and especially with Snoopy, he still had his popularity in places.
Yeah, I think this was also like Mario Tennis is super hot. What franchise do we own that we can make a buck off of? Dr. Mario 64 comes out. Kirby Tilt and Tumble, which is a super cool concept for a game that I feel like never gets used anymore.
Well, it's one of those particular things that it was more the first concept of really having either motion controls or the specific movement of the console to help out with gameplay and whatnot from there, though was especially tricky since most everything was inside of the cart to actually do it.
Yeah.
And the thing bulged outside of your color whenever you had it installed.
Yeah, they had to put the gyroscope in the cart, so it was super awkward. There was also a game, I don't remember what it was called, you might know, but there was one game, it was like an RPG, but there was like a solar panel on the back of the cart. So in order to do certain spells in the game, you had to go outside and get sunlight on it.
I think I know what you're talking about, but the title of it escapes me, though I think it's not released for another year or two.
Yeah, it might be a little while after this, but The Simpsons Wrestling, which is a game that helped ruin my childhood.
Oh, so sad for you. I'm sorry.
They take two of my favorite things, put them together, and then hand me a pile of shit.
Like, how is it that those two things don't work?
Well, okay. So, in all fairness, the game should never have been made because anybody with like half a brain cell would know that this isn't going to be a good idea.
Um,
But The Simpsons is super popular at this time. Wrestling is still popular at this time. So they're like, well, let's just smush these two things together and make a game, and it's not good.
so sad.
Moving along, we get Mario Party 3 on the N64.
Yes.
We get Myst 3 Exile. We get Cool Borders, Crazy Taxi 2. Oh my god, a game that ruined many a life called Bejeweled came out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Castlevania Circle of the Moon.
Mhm.
A bunch of re-releases on the Game Boy Advance that I'm not going to go through because they ported a bunch of stuff over. But
Oh,
I will
that's
bring up F-Zero Maximum Velocity.
yeah, that's true.
Sonic Adventure 2 comes out on the Dreamcast. Baldur's Gate 2 gets an expansion called Throne of Ball. Final Fantasy Chronicles comes out.
Yeah, nothing super fancy, just kind of a
I think it's just like a re-release, isn't it?
Trigger.
Yeah. Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec comes out, which is a great game. Mega Man Legends makes its way to Windows. City Crisis? I don't remember this one. Oh, it's a helicopter game. Yeah, I never played that. This little game called Final Fantasy X releases in Japan.
Yeah.
Max Payne comes out on PC. Pokemon Crystal makes its way to North America, which is like the version, like it's the yellow for the gold and silver games, right?
Yeah, essentially.
Okay. Golden Sun comes out on the Game Boy Advance, which is a game I still have yet to play, but I really should.
It has neat concepts.
It does. And it's on Switch Online now, isn't it?
Um,
I thought they
It's been a while since last time I checked, but it is a case that you need to get the expansion thing for the
right.
online stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. WWF Betrayal comes out on the Game Boy Color, which is not a very good game.
You know, wrestling game on a Game Boy.
Well, see, you by it being a WWF game, you assume it's a wrestling game, but it's
Hmm.
not. It's actually a beat 'em up.
Okay, that's not as terrible. It's a better idea for the concept and on the hardware.
Yes, it's not a good game, but I understand why they did that. The
Hmm.
WWF around this time wanted to like make games that weren't wrestling games, or like get people to make games that weren't wrestling games. So they did this, and they did like Crush Hour and stuff, and none of them were very good. Crush Hour is a game we're gonna have to play at some point, Dave.
Hooray! I'm gonna be horribly tortured again.
Do you know what Crush Hour is? Are you familiar with it?
Not, not really familiar with that one, no.
It's WWF meets Twisted Metal.
Oh. Oh.
Continuing along, we get Mario Kart Super Circuit on the Game Boy Advance, which is a game I spent more time playing than I want to admit.
Hmm.
We get Shenmue 2 on the Dreamcast. We'd also get Advance Wars finally making its way to North America.
Yes, with the fancy things.
Yes. A bunch of other stuff that doesn't really matter all that much. Phantasy Star Online version 2, which I'm assuming is just an update or something for the Dreamcast.
Hmm.
Silent Hill 2, a little game that again is not culturally relevant at all. I can't wait to play the remake of this. It looks so good. And I've never played any of the Silent Hill games.
Ah.
What else do we have? Scooby Doo and the Cyber Chase, which is a terrible game. Time
Hmm.
Crisis 2, which certainly was a game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney comes out, but I think this is only in Japan. I don't think it comes to America just yet.
Okay.
Because I think we don't get it until the DS. Yeah, it's Japan only at this point, which is
Hmm.
sad because I like those games.
It's Phoenix Wright game. It is neat.
It is. Grand Theft Auto 3 makes its way to the PS2, which is a very good game. Doom makes its way to the Game Boy Advance because it can run on a toaster at this point.
Yeah.
Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, Crash Bandicoot Wrath of Cortex, and oh god, Spyro Season of Ice. I forgot about these games. Oh shit.
Yeah. Yeah. This was a thing that happened.
Let's just ignore that and hopefully it'll go away. Um, Civilization 3 comes out, which is I think it's the first Civilization game I ever played, and I have a soft spot for that game as a result.
Okay.
Mega Man Battle Network. We get the first Burnout. SSX Tricky comes out. Oh my god. Um, 007 Agent Under Fire. Oh my god. Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty.
Yeah, that was definitely a thing.
It definitely was. Harvest Moon 3 on the Game Boy Color comes out. We get Cell Damage, which is a game that I feel like nobody remembers.
It was definitely a thing. Marvelous case of you see it on a shelf, it's like you're somewhat interested, but you're like the art and whatnot betrays it, but then you actually see the gameplay and whatnot, and no, it does not. But also the case of oh no, it does not.
This little game called Halo Combat Evolved came out on the Xbox.
You know that one little game that didn't do that much at all.
No,
Not too much of a flip.
it was nothing. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone comes out on a whole bunch of things.
Because Harry Potter craziness.
Yeah, this is like at the height of the mania. A little game that I know you've never played, but NHL Hits 2002, because that game is great. Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader comes out. We get Super Monkey Ball, Luigi's Mansion,
Yes. Now more in the time of the GameCube's release.
Yes, I believe this is the launch of the GameCube right here. WWF Road to WrestleMania, which is a Game Boy Advance game, which also is shite. Wario Land 4, WWF SmackDown Just Bring It comes to the PS2, which, hey, that's a return to form at least.
Hmm.
Return to Castle Wolfenstein comes out. Here's this little game that nobody cares about, Dave. Super Smash Bros. Melee comes out in Japan.
Oh, there you go. This isn't going to be culturally relevant to any sort of things at all.
Nope, not at all. Uh, this little game called Pikmin comes out.
Ah, yes, the Pikmins.
And then later in the year, Melee comes to North America. We get Mega Man X6. We get Mortal Kombat Advance. Oh, God. Anything else? Final Fantasy X makes its way to the PS2 in North America. And we get Silent Hill 2 Director's Cut. And that's everything for 2001.
Yes, with that. There were a couple little blips on the list there that I knew of, but didn't really realize that were released at the time, but I discovered on later that we didn't touch on that I would just like to mention from there.
Yeah.
Mostly because hearing about them, they're amazing and stupid and mildly ridiculous. So back over in March, there was a game released from Squaresoft at the time on the PS2 called The Bouncer,
Okay.
which was them taking Final Fantasy characters in a typical sort of story, like own characters per story, but still they look like Final Fantasy characters, let's be honest, people, and made a 3D beat 'em up style game.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was, but it does not play very well.
Ah, that's unfortunate.
Some sadness in that case. And double checking with the list. Did not make a point of remembering where those ones were. Further down the list than I was expecting. Damn, can't find them again to point them out, but it was nice with seeing a couple of additional ones on the list. It's like, that's when that was released. It makes sense, but the games were terrible. But anywho's, we're getting off track and getting to the concept of where we're actually here.
Almost. So I'm going to quickly go over movies now.
Mhm.
I'm just going to go through the top 10 most highest grossing films for each year. So 99, it's Phantom Menace, The Sixth Sense, Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me,
Mm,
Toy Story 2, The Matrix, Tarzan, Big Daddy. Oh, God, it's an Adam Sandler movie.
yeah,
The
yeah.
Mummy, Runaway Bride, and The Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, all makes sense, but also a case of, oh God, that was the time. That was the bloody time.
Blair Witch Project is a decent movie if you go back and watch it. Just don't watch any of the sequels.
Hmm.
So for 2000, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Mission Impossible 2, Gladiator, The Perfect Storm, Meet the Parents, the first X-Men movie, Scary Movie, What Lies Beneath, Dinosaur, and Aaron Brockovich.
Mildly surprised with Dinosaur because that's one of the ones from, I believe, supposedly Pixar and Disney.
Yeah, I think it's a Disney film, yeah.
And it was kind of one of the ones that it made sense. It looked good for the time, but it was kind of the case of it had no story.
Okay, I don't think I ever saw it, but I always thought it was a failure. But apparently it did well at the box office.
Like maybe just for its art direction alone is the only thing I could think of because everything else was just kind of like, yeah.
Alrighty, and now for 2001, oh my god, was this a year? Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone,
Duh.
Shrek,
Yeah.
Monsters Inc.,
Mm-hmm.
Rush Hour 2, The
Yes.
Mummy Returns, Pearl
Mm-hmm.
Harbor, Jurassic Park 3,
Yeah.
Planet of the Apes, Hannibal, and The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah. Yeah. It's quite amazing that things didn't explode with all the particular hits in the theaters.
So, fun fact, I've only seen Fellowship of the Ring. I haven't seen any of the Lord of the Rings movies. And I haven't
Hmm.
seen any of the Harry Potter movies.
Possibly for the best, because quite honestly, the aesthetic and all the stuff that they can work with for the movie magic and whatnot is fun and whatnot, but it's still a case that actually reading it in the book gives you more context and imagination to everything within the specific concept of the world.
So, I read the first two or three books,
Hmm.
something like that.
Hmm. Usually a good fair place.
But
It's kind of the case of if you want to get a good concept of all the stuff that kind of happens, usually getting up to about three or so, you're usually good. It's not unless that you're either really wanting to see how the story goes along or wanting to see more action within it. You have to go into the later books.
here's the fun part. I own all of them. They're sitting on my shelf. I've just never watched them.
Yeah, understandable, especially with your backlog.
It's true. I have an entire bookshelf of movies that I haven't watched, or some of it are things that I've watched that I keep meaning to rewatch because I bought them on like 4K or something, and I just haven't got around to them yet.
Mhm.
But let's get into the movie finally.
Yes, finally.
Okay, so as we said, this movie released in November of 2001, November 18th of 2001. Oh yes, and a week later the sequel would drop.
Mm.
It was a made for TV movie that was broadcast on YTV in Canada. I'm not sure who broadcast it in the States, but let's get to the plot of this. Oh my god.
So, out of curiosity, remember those little name drops from the end of the last season about another supposed virus that's causing trouble?
Vaguely. They've mentioned Daemon. So there's clearly a
Mm.
plan in place for that. I just didn't think it would be this.
Mm.
But let's get into the plot here. So, we have a super virus known as Daemon that has taken over the supercomputer and is trying to infect the entire net. Despite being a virus, she is not malevolent and only wants to bring order to the net. To this end, she uses her infection, which the infected call the Word, to brainwash everyone she comes in contact with. She has already infected all of the Guardian Collective apart from Bob and Matrix. The Guardians' key tools, which allowed them to open portals to sealed off systems, left the Guardians when Daemon infected them. Because Bob merged with his key tool, he's the only Guardian who can still create portals, so Daemon makes multiple attempts to capture and infect him.
Mhm.
In the first part of the movie, an army of infected Guardians invade Mainframe. Hexadecimal, now loyal to Bob, helps him remove them from Mainframe without deleting them. In doing so, she uses up so much of her power that she is reformatted into a sprite and becomes enveloped in a null cocoon, which the Matrix siblings recognize as their father, Wellman. In a series of
Mhm.
flashbacks, Hex reveals that when Wellman activated his gateway command shortly before Bob arrived on Mainframe, it brought the supervisors this isn't correct. It should be Gigabyte into Mainframe's Twin City, which created her and Megabyte somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
This caused an explosion which nullified Mainframe's Twin City and everyone in it, including Wellham, and split Gigabyte into Megabyte and Hexadecimal, although it's not explained how that happens, and it kind of makes no sense to me. Doc convinces Hex to take Wellman to make Wellman a new body out of nulls, then convinces Wellman to rebuild his gate command.
Mhm.
Mouse, Dot, and Fong manage to seal off a few systems on the net, and when Daemon activates her infection, which has been laying dormant, all systems besides those become infected. During the course of the battle, Mike the TV, Andrea, Matrix, and Mouse become infected, and therefore loyal to Daemon. Since it was
Mm.
Mouse who programmed the firewalls that sealed off systems like Mainframe, Damon uses Mouse to break into Mainframe as she needs Bob to help her infect the other sealed off systems. After Damon arrives in Mainframe and infects Bob, she forces him to create portals to those systems, which is slowly killing him. By absorbing the energy of Mainframe's core, Hexadecimal powers back up into a virus again and uses the energy to fight Damon. However, her attempts are in vain. Damon is a Kron virus, and her time has come. So she decompiles herself to initiate the final stage of her infection. This causes everyone she infected to begin a net-wide binary countdown. When it reaches 0, all the infected will be deleted, and so will the net. After infecting Little Enzo's icon, Hexadecimal takes a cure to Damon's infection from Matrix's icon and delivers it to the entire net using the gateway command. In essence, Hexadecimal sacrificed herself to cure the entire net from Damon's infection. At the end of the movie, Bob and Doc get engaged, and I'm going to stop there, and we'll talk about the next sentence or two later because it makes me angry. Okay.
Yeah.
So what did you think of the movie up until this point?
With all the stuff that happens, it's definitely a interesting rise from the end of the season going into an additional story, touching on the additional points of all the stuff that's kind of happening with the additional virus becoming the new big bad within it. It works well enough, especially with the story concepts that it sort of plays around with. I suppose the biggest thing is kind of explaining slash giving backstory to more of Mainframe and other sorts of things of the case of it used to be two cities until there was a giant explosion which created Lost Nulls where Hexadecimal hangs out. And kind of the case of that's why there's probably not a whole lot of kids for Enzo to play with when he was young.
Yeah, I thought the movie was quite good. I had a couple of nitpicks here or there, but nothing like... Okay, so the one thing I noticed was this movie might have a couple of opinions. I don't know if you caught them because they were very, very, very subtle, David.
You know, like a baseball bat to the cranium.
Yeah, this movie might have a few things to say about religion.
Maybe just a touch.
Because Damon is definitely playing up a religion. Like, they're definitely playing her up as, like, a quote-unquote religious figure. Because, like, just the way, like, she's dressed and the way people address her and that she calls her infection the word. Like, there's a lot of religious symbolism in this film.
And I suppose that leads up to the question of your thoughts on Daemon and that specific design that they decided to go with for her character and how it sort of worked with the style of story that they went with.
I really like the design, actually. It caught me off guard because I assumed we were going to get like another Megabyte type kind of design, like a big scary monster. Whereas they went with this kind of just like small feminine design, where she's like entirely peaceful and very calm, and I'm like, that kind of makes her scarier, like because she's just trying to spread the word, David. She just wants to help you.
Yeah, so true. And it's a case of essentially she does her function, which is mildly terrifying, and also the case of if the situation wasn't placed as well as how it was sort of written, it is like, no, complete game over. Though it sort of goes with the concept of what kind of happened in the past and all the particular things that kind of relate a bit as well to her character, since amazingly enough they went with her name and not so much a particular anagram for the thing that she kind of stands for.
Yes, again, the name is very subtle. But I kind of appreciate, like, I get not that I appreciate, but I understand why there's not as much subtlety in this because again, it's for kids
Yeah.
and subtlety
Then,
doesn't always work with children. So,
yeah, with that, I suppose the one other particular thing was in the early hours of the episode, it touches on going back into games, uh, those sort of interactions and whatnot. And the very first thing they go into is a parody video game of Austin Powers.
yes, they do. And they kill Austin Powers very quickly.
Yes.
Well, I
And
should
I
say,
suppose it's the question of how much did you get caught up in the Austin Powers phenomenon?
um, like I saw the movies, but I wasn't like crazy about it.
Okay.
Like I was
Again, it
like,
was a
they're
thing
funny,
in
but I wasn't like one of those people who was like, I didn't have like merchandise or buy the video games or anything. I'm like, the movies are funny, I'll watch them, but like, whatever.
Mhm.
Why?
Yeah, sort of the case of, ha ha, they're going for the obvious sort of stuff, which is understandable, but also nowadays just,
How
it was a thing at the time.
did you enjoy them at the time?
At the time, most definitely, because again, at my age, my sense of humor, with at least being a little bit older, heading into teenish sort of ages from there, just the case of, yeah, funny sort of stuff, but still the immature stuff of funny with that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of came out at like the perfect time for us.
Hmm.
Like because when's the first one's like 95, I want to say. So that was probably a bit early, but I feel
Yeah, with
like
that, and of course with sequels, and then people like, oh hey, these particular films are coming out, and then we're like, what are these films about? And it's like, oh man.
okay, so the first one's 97 and then 99 and 2002. So they were kind of like the perfect kind of time period for us as cuz like we're like in middle school when these are coming out, so it's kind of like perfect.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I enjoy the Austin Powers movies. I kind of want to see a fourth one, but I also don't.
It could supposedly be a thing, but it's kind of a case of you'd either need all the perfect scenarios to align with that, or otherwise it's probably not going to end up too well.
Yeah, I they at one point had talked about doing an animated series, and I kind of wish that had happened
Possibly.
because
I
they
think.
because it was going to be on HBO, so it wasn't going to be like a kid series.
Okay.
Yeah,
But anywho's passing the distraction of that. Um, One of the other things was just kind of the basis of what they decided to do with some of the characters within the movie in certain bases. And in some cases, it's understandable, but in other cases, it's kind of like some of these people either had to get character changes and or regressions in their story arcs. So I suppose touching on the couple of main big ones that I sort of thought of was Matrix being his old style angry self again,
yeah,
and just, oh hey, all these people are invading, time to kill. And it's like, oh wait, they're sprites, we shouldn't do that. And it's like, wait, there are people fighting us, we gotta kill them, and going through the danger aspect of him. And then the aspect of losing Andrea and him going through his sulking session.
yeah. Okay. I totally see what you're saying that they did regress some characters, like considering what happened in the third season and like the growth we had with them. That's yeah. I mean, you're bang on with that. I will say that though, for the first time, I actually enjoyed Mike the TV.
No, I'm not too surprised with that particular stuff. They still kept base of the character, and out of all the particular things that Hexadecimal could have done, that was the smartest decision she could have went with.
My I
Again,
just
with her particular quote for the show, she has a marvelous sense of humor.
I just love him becoming this like TV preacher. and he's got the song and everything in it. Oh, it's so good, Dave. It's so good. And I'm like, it's so bang on what those TV preachers are like, and like, yeah, it's so good.
Mhm.
It's my favorite thing of that they've done with Mike the TV.
Okay. So another particular character is Dot, with especially all the stuff that she was kind of going through is understandable, but still kind of a case of she still does her job, helps to protect the system and whatnot, but then kind of gets obsessed with the kind of B C-ish plot that's happening within the movie. And it's kind of like possibly understandable, but also kind of the case of, I question the character choices.
Oh, where she becomes obsessed with her dad thing, with the dad thing.
Yes, because with backstory and whatnot, her father was a scientist working with trying to reconnect systems to other ones out in the World Wide Web. And with timing, experiment going wrong, and virus involvement, their whole big explosion and a whole bunch of things gone bad.
Yeah. I don't know, because on one hand, like I kind of understand why she becomes so like in that plot, because like it kind of makes sense because that's like her dad is allegedly come back to life, so I understand that becoming her priority.
Mm.
But yeah, I didn't really like that storyline, so I was like, I'd rather have badass Dot who's like this military leader and not, what she becomes in this for parts.
Yeah. And speaking of particular characters becoming things, the thoughts on Hexadecimal with how things panned out with her character.
Okay, so she starts off as a virus and then she becomes a regular sprite after she uses her power to stop something or other.
Stopping the Guardians from first
Right,
invading Ukraine and
right, right,
starting.
right, right, right. And then she gets charged up again to become a virus, and I don't understand how that works because that makes no sense to me. But okay, I'll go with it. And then she becomes a virus, which should, in theory, make her evil. But then she sacrifices herself to save Mainframe.
Hmm.
I mean, so the problem is, I like hexadecimal,
Hmm.
but I like scheming evil hexadecimal.
Not so much love obsessed, absolutely adores Bob Hexadecimal.
Like, I liked it when she had a crush on Bob, but she was still evil and crazy because that was like entertaining. But
Hmm.
here it's like, she's not really interesting if she's just like a lovesick teenager.
Um, hmm.
So yeah, I didn't love that.
Okay. And I suppose the other question, what did you think of Hexadecimal as a sprite?
I thought it was boring. Like I said, like I'm like I don't care about Hex if she's not crazy and powerful and being interesting. The
Hmm.
design's good. I'll give them that. Like I like the design, but I thought from a character perspective, at first I was like, oh, so this is how they're gonna bring her in to make her like part of the team full time. But then she sacrifices herself after she gets her powers back, and I'm like, okay, like that's an interesting character growth thing, but I feel like it kind of comes out of nowhere almost. I feel like if you're gonna do that, it should have been done in the second movie, so you had more time to kind of establish that character arc.
Okay.
Now, do you have anything else about this before we get to the teaser for the next movie?
I think there was one last little thing
Okay.
of what were your thoughts with young Enzo, with his experiences through the movie, what sort of stuff was happening, and his kind of reactions and thoughts of what to do?
I forgot about young Enzo.
Kind of understandable because on the start of the movie, he's young Enzo. Case of the game's coming down, it's like, where's Enzo? It's like, oh no, he's in the game. And case of rebooting into the tiny, not super helpful version of things. And then case of, oh man, you need to supposedly learn stuff. Here's the DVD set of Reboot. You can catch yourself up on stuff.
Dave, I forgot about young Enzo and I was happy.
then he gets the thought of, oh man, all this stuff happened to Matrix, who was me. So now I could be young Matrix. And then it's like, oh dear God.
I just I understand why why Enzo is there
Hmm.
because they need like a point of view character for kids,
Hmm.
and this is primarily aimed at children. But
Hmm.
why does he have to be annoying?
But
Like,
then I think it's the nicer sort of thought of, he's the one at the end that gets things pushed toward the better resolution of things, where the game plan from Dot's perspective is do a repeat of what happened to Enzo originally. Send him into the games. He bounces into the games so he becomes older Matrix and whatnot, so he can supposedly save everyone. He doesn't do that. He comes out of the game with hack and slash, and it's like, dude, you won. Why did you do that? It's like, I don't know. Just all the particular stuff that's going on just doesn't seem to make sense. And we have to do something. And he takes initiative.
okay, so I will agree with you on that point. That was
Hmm.
one of the times where I was like, okay, Enzo isn't being trash for once. And I agree that Dot sending him into the game to like make him become Matrix is kind of a weird thing for Dot to do because that seems kind of out of character for her. But I just he's so annoying most of the time where he's like, "I'm not Enzo, I'm Matrix now," and I'm just like, "I don't care, shut up, kid."
But then, of course, the marvelous case of he takes the picture of what he wants to be Enzo Matrix to mend and defend the original goal of what he was when he received the abilities from Bob. And especially with Hexadecimal's help and other little things, be an interesting thing or two heading into the next movies or so.
Oh god. Okay. So we get a so I thought at this point I was like, this is a really good send off for the series. We kind of have this really nice wrap up, and everything's really clean. And how are they going to get a sequel out of this? And
So
then
you want to say the thing or shall I say it?
a portal opens, and out of it steps Ray Tracer and a young Bob. And I immediately went, "The fuck."
In a typical sort of sense, or did you also have to go and flip a table?
Well, I was just like, you had such a good ending for the series. Now, I get why, like, they probably got a contract where you have to make two movies, yada yada, whatever. I just feel like you should have switched these two. Like, because I'm assuming I haven't seen my two Bobs yet, so I can't
Maybe not.
speak to
Yeah.
anything that happens in it. But
Hmm.
I just feel like it can't be like it's got to be more or less standalone.
Okay.
And if it is, that seems really lame because I would have rather you did the standalone movie and then do the kind of big series wrap up, which is what it felt like Daemon Rising was. Now, maybe I'm wrong. That's possible because, like I said, I haven't seen it. But it
Mm,
just feels like it's a weird order to do them in.
yeah. It's a case of I have memories of the couple last little bits within the second movie and going on from there. It'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on it. But also a case of I'm also not quite sure of the thought process of what sort of other things they have in mind going into this film or what I don't remember that they've done with it. So kind of the case of I might just be with you there being like, why did they do this? Out of all the options, why did they take this route?
Yeah, it feels like a weird choice to the way this is. They've decided to have this one before the other one. It feels like it should be the other way around.
Like the only one thing I can think of, it's a typical basic story concept of that sort of stuff going on. And it happened with Matrix, so why not with Bob? And just like, oh God.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, is there anything else about this movie that you wanted to discuss?
I think on whole, I like the case with Damon as a enemy sort of character and whatnot because it's different concept within the show, and especially with things at the time that I had this sort of chance to experience. And it's one of those particular cases of there was nothing anybody could do within the story to stop her from completing her function. It was just kind of the case of the last minute struggle, bonus things, and last little things that everyone kind of had on hand to be like, oh, we could do this to supposedly save the entire net, that caused the end of the story to not be horrible and completely explodey. And just like the case of, wow, that was one heck of a close call.
Yeah, like I said, I liked this movie for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
but there were some. I had a couple of issues with it, but nothing too bad. I thought it was fine. I thought it was a good end to the series.
Mm-hmm. I think
Unfortunately,
the
it's not the end of the series.
Eh, well, I suppose the question was, what were things that you either thought of or could think of now that could supposedly either fix the story within your mind or you would think would be better sort of ideas to go with instead?
Delete the last 10 seconds of this movie.
Yeah, that would definitely help.
That would fix the problem. Okay, so if you decide that you like, so let's say contractually they had to do two movies, and they wanted to do Daemon Rising because they had already set up her as a villain to come in season 3.
Hmm.
Let's go with that. So we're doing. So in that case, we end this film with. I keep this film the same because I quite enjoy most of it.
Okay.
I then, if so, we're having Bob and Dot get engaged at the end of this film. We start the second film with them uh, getting married,
Okay.
and then we have what? How who can you bring in to be a threat though?
Okay. Like
Oh
out of your supposed options,
no,
either.
okay, I figured it out already.
Mm.
So this series isn't above doing some hand wavy bullshit.
Okay.
So I'm gonna do some hand wavy bullshit.
There it goes.
So how did Megabyte die?
With him in the end of the season, it was the case of pretty much a reversal of what happened to Bob. He got shot into the portal of the web, and so did Megabyte.
Right. Okay. Perfect. That works then. So Megabyte and Hex are both destroyed in the web somehow, um,
Mhm.
and then you can just play up that somehow their data is able to combine and is reconstituted as Gigabyte, and Gigabyte comes back to get revenge on Mainframe.
Okay. Hmm.
That's my
Again,
hand
would you
my
keep
hand
the
wavy
same?
bullshit.
All right with that. So you're thinking the case of hexadecimal spreading out her influence with the cure for Damon's virus, spreads herself throughout the web and whatnot, and it somehow kind of connects with the remaining connections of megabytes data that's out there that would somehow combine back into their original form.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, granted, this is an idea I came up with in 30 seconds, and I could probably come up with a better one if I had more time. But just off the
Mm.
top of my head, that would be my first idea.
Radios, radios.
Because at least that feels like it could have stakes to it. Whereas I don't know how this story is going to have like any interesting stakes, but
Okay.
we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, so until next time, I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.